Hi, my name is Rohan Poddar. I'm the Chief Storyteller and Managing Partner at Rohan Poddar Creative Media LLP. And today I am bringing to you a webinar on the 8-stage employer journey storytelling. Let me quickly give you a background for this webinar. Just a few weeks back, me and my team were analyzing the sales interactions and the client conversations we had over the last 6 months. And we realized that most of them were about employer branding. Clients were not sure how to go about employer branding. Now, employer branding is a multidisciplinary exercise. It needs collaboration between the HR people on one side and the marketing and communications. Within HR as well, there are a lot of stakeholders like the talent acquisition managers, employee engagement teams, internal communications, onboarding team, HR business partners, etc. So we thought, let us go back to the basics and map the journey an employee takes right from the moment he is aware of the organization, he gets interviewed, starts working in the organization, to the point he exits the organization. And we figured that it's an 8-stage employer journey that happens for any organization. And if we could do very specific storytelling at each of these stages, then we will be able to create a very strong, formidable employer brand. So let's get straight into it. Let me quickly share with you a screen, a whiteboard. So the format of this webinar is I'm not going to show you a presentation. Instead, what I will do is I will share with you a whiteboard and express my ideas as I talk along. So the very first stage of employer journey is, of course, awareness. This is when your employee becomes aware of your organization for the very first time. Now, typically, what is it that, or what kind of storytelling would you like to do at this stage? Your storytelling at this stage needs to be about your EVP narrative. So this is where you will talk about your salary and benefits, your workplace culture, the scope to grow within the organization, the flexibility, etc. You essentially want to project your organization as a great place to work across any kind of role, across multiple roles, right? That's where this will come in. Now let's also look at what formats can you use to do this. So the best format would be, I would say, short brand films. You create short films that are very engaging, that use actual employees, that has a very strong narrative, that's very relatable in its messaging to your potential workforce, and you'll be able to carry home the message. Let's look at the formats that this can be done through. So of course, you would want to put this on your LinkedIn page, company page. You would want to put this on your careers page, right? On YouTube and other social media handles. Now, this discussion is incomplete without identifying the stakeholders from your end to do storytelling. So let me quickly write down the stakeholders. Now, typically, talent acquisition team, your hiring managers have to be involved in storytelling at this stage. It has to be, of course, if you have an employer branding team, right? And it would be your general HR, corporate HR, correct? So these are the stakeholders from your end at this particular stage. Now, let me quickly go to the second stage of this, which is your recruitment. Recruitment is often for a specific set of roles, right? So you need to, this is the stage where organizations put out the job description, what the role entails, etc. Right? This is again a point, a very crucial point in the employee journey when you can do storytelling. So what kind of story can you tell? We suggest you should do targeted employee stories. So if you're hiring for, let's say, project manager, you could do stories about stories around your actual project managers and how they have grown in your organization. That gives you your potential candidate who's applying for the opening or the position of project manager a sneak peek into what the life of project manager is and what it entails to be a part of your organization, right? Now let's look at what kind of formats you could use here. Of course, you can use videos, right? Short videos. I would also mention user generated content, right? If you can have your actual project managers shoot video on their smartphones, of course with a certain theme, and post it, that will look very earthy, very relatable. You would let's look at the format. The format that you can use here is, you will want to of course put this on your LinkedIn page, your recruitment page, right, where you put out your uh, openings. It could also be on job portals for that matter, right? It could be on job portals where you could use this storytelling, and of course on your YouTube and other social media channels. Let's look at the uh, stakeholders that would be required. Yeah, of course, your talent acquisition, your employer branding, right, and your HR business partners. So these are the people who typically liaison with the business side and are involved in bridging the gap between HR and the business. So these are the people who know what that role entails. All right, let's move to the third stage of employer journey, right, which is, of course, interview. Now, interview is an amazing platform to do storytelling. Why? Because the interviewer and the interviewee are sitting one-to-one across each other. And here's where we would say that this platform should be utilized by the interviewer to tell interviewer stories, or these stories could pertain to your certain significant events within the organization, right? So the interview doesn't become an interrogation, it becomes a conversation. And stories can be used by interviewers to gauge the perception, opinions, views of the interviewees on specific matters, right? So the discussion then becomes anecdotal, then rather than being very theoretical or academic. Okay, what's the best format? One-to-one, right? It's either through Zoom, virtual, or it's in your office premises, in your conference room, right? That's the best place to do this. Now, of course, people who are involved, or stakeholders who are involved in this, are the HODs, right? Most often they're heads of the function that are involved in interviewing process. Of course, the HR BPs as well that are involved in this. These are the key stakeholders who need to be sensitized about storytelling and who need to be involved as the forefront actors for storytelling. Right. Let me move to the fourth stage of employer journey, which is onboarding. Right. So you have interviewed the employee, you've given him an offer letter, and of course the employee is working somewhere, so he's got 2 to 3 months of notice period. Now typically this is a very delicate period, because this is where most employees might drop off, potential candidates might drop off if they have a competing offer. Now it would behoove well for any employer branding team to be continuously connected with the candidates during this particular notice period, right, between the interview and the onboarding. And how could that be? So this is again where storytelling would be a very effective tool to do this. So in this period, you would want to tell stories related to your leadership, right? Your culture, right? Uh, so the candidate who's about to join your organization knows about how the leadership thinks, what's the vision. He gets a sneak peek into what the culture is, and this through stories of actual people, stories narrated by people in leadership positions, right? This would help. Now, there could be some really interesting formats here you could experiment with. So, for example, of course, videos. Again, when I say videos, videos is an all-encompassing term. It could include animation videos, but typically which are used for instructional messaging. It would include motion graphics videos, typographics videos, apart from, of course, live action films. Videos, and let me introduce podcast here. So what if you have a podcast that you encourage your potential joinees to participate in, maybe every Thursday, every Friday, and the topics that the host of the podcast discusses are is these topics are very relevant to what a potential joinee would want to hear about his organization, his potential organization, right? So podcast could be a very good tool. It's not very invasive. You just have to listen. They can listen to that podcast anytime. They can be intimated ahead of time. So podcast, web content, right? Web content, I mean, it could be email newsletter, it could be access to a microsite or a specific site only for potential joinees, which will have all this information as well as stories about your organization. So what you're essentially trying to do is to create touch points and be in continuous communication with the joinees. You could also have physical events in your office, say on a Friday evening, where you can invite the potential joinees, right? All right. Stakeholders, very quickly, let's look at the stakeholders here. It's the onboarding team, right? Sorry for the typos here. Onboarding team, and of course, your HR BPs will be involved. So if any HRBP business partner is listening to this podcast, you have a very important job to do in storytelling. Okay, let me take a fresh board here. So far we've covered 4 stages of our employee journey. Right, let me now go to the 5th stage, which is engagement and development, right? Now the employee has become a part of the organization. He started working in his role, in his job, right? This is where you would want to communicate with the employee, and the kind of stories you could tell could be about the values, the workplace values, right? It could be about the growth factors. It could be about, of course, your DEI is a very important role. It has a very important role to play here in terms of storytelling, right? And again, as I say, I'm not talking about general content on your values or a one pager on your values or something. I'm talking about stories. So if your value is being faster, if that's your workplace value, you would want to demonstrate what that actually means in day-to-day work life. And the best way to demonstrate that is through taking up or making a story on an actual situation that has happened with an actual employee, right? So likewise, you would want to create stories and anecdotes about your growth, your culture, um, your diversity, equity, and inclusion stories, right? Um, okay, let's look at the formats where you could do this. Videos, of course, universal, multifaceted videos. There are videos that can do podcast. So you could have an internal podcast that airs an episode every maybe once a week, twice a week on issues, right? The other thing you could actually do here is to look at corporate theater. Right? This is again a very interesting format of storytelling where you set up a play on, let's say you want to sensitize your employees on sexual harassment at workplace. Now, one way is, of course, to send them a literature on email, which is a policy. But the other way, or more effective way, that I think this could be done is by arranging a short play at various premises or various office locations of your organization, and show how people who are in actual sexual harassment situations should react or do react, right? And that becomes a very powerful messaging, and it stays in the minds of your employees for a longer time. So theater, corporate theater, is very interesting format here, correct? And other than that, of course, you have web content. Again, when I say web content, it includes things that you sent on your company's intranet portal. It could be email newsletter, it could be on your YouTube, etc. So yeah, social media. Now, when it comes to storytelling for engagement and development, of course, you need to get your HRBPs and employee engagement folks involved, right? Because employee engagement people are the people who are responsible for coming up with programs and initiatives. They are the ones who work with internal communications, right? So yeah, it could be internal communications, or these are the stakeholders, right? Let me now go to the sixth stage of an employer journey, which is retention and recognition, right? Now, you ideally, one of the principal aims of employer branding is to create brand advocates within the employee or within the workforce, right? Now, what kind of stories would help you do that? So, curated individual stories, right? So, you carefully select certain employees from a certain function, seniority, or a certain role, and you celebrate or you tell their stories about their contribution to the organization, both personally and professionally, right? And how that has helped, how that has made your organization a better place in terms of its work ethic or in terms of its achievement, collective achievement, right? Formats, again, videos, very good for, it's a universal, videos is a universal format, and you can do a lot with videos and things. So videos is, will often find podcast, as I said. You could actually have a company podcast, a program. Employer branding would actually focus on setting up a company podcast, because this podcast, as I said, could be very useful for not only your potential joinees, but day-to-day issues in the organization, as well as for employee engagement, retention, etc. So podcast, highly recommended here. And of course, events, you could have a town hall event where you could invite these uh, these stellar employees and have them share their stories with the rest of the workforce, right? Yeah. So who are the stakeholders here? It's the HRBPs, the employee engagement people will be stakeholders in running the storytelling here. Let's go to the penultimate stage, which is offboarding. Offboarding and separation, right? Now, in spite of your best efforts, there'll always be attrition. Employees would always want to leave your organization, either for personal reasons or for greener pastures. The kind of storytelling that we recommend would be stories or talk of your HOD or CHRO. This talk is directed towards the employee which is leaving your organization. And this talk is about lauding the efforts, the contribution that this employee brought to the table in your organization, and wishing him all the best for future endeavors, right? But it is directed, it's very personalized communication, right? And now again, you wouldn't be able to do this for all the employees, but there could be one general communication, and there could be some specific communications for people who are leaving your organization at higher levels, right? And if the leadership talks to your employees who are quitting, it leaves a good taste. So if you want to separate anyways, why don't you separate on a good note? right? Now, the format for this is, videos and email newsletters, right? In fact, this could be sent out to all the employees, right? Not just to the employee in question who's leaving the organization, so that it creates a culture where other employees know that your company has no bitterness for employees who are leaving the organization. In fact, they celebrate their contributions that they've done to the organization. So who may be the stakeholders here? HRBPs, again, employee engagement people, right? You got a lot of things, you got a lot on your plate. All right, to the last stage of employer journey, which actually is not a part of your organization, which is alumni, your past employees who have left your organization sometime back, 3 months back, 6 months back, 2 years back. What if you could institute storytelling to celebrate their contributions to your organization while they were with your organization, right? So what I'm talking about is, I'm talking about contribution stories of these people, right? And those are genuine contribution stories where you're not expecting anything in return, but you're just celebrating whatever they've done for your organization through videos, through social media, right? Through your other digital platforms, web, like your career section maybe, all right? Or through your podcast, right? Podcast could be one, but podcast is internal, so I'm not including that here. But yes, you could have a situation where you could have your past employee be a part of the podcast, right? So again, these things are subject to a lot of protocols and all. So I'm just leaving, my job is to leave the ideas on the table. And if you're from the employer branding or from HR side or involved in storytelling or communication, then my job here, as I said, is to leave ideas on the table and leave it to your consideration. All right, fair enough. So this is our who are the people who are needed here? Your HRBPs, your employer branding folks, right? And your employee engagement folks. Correct. So there you have it, the 8 stages of employer journey within your organization, and what stories you can tell at each of those stages. I hope this was informative, insightful for you. Now, the idea of this webinar was to bring these new creative thinking or this style of communication and put it in front of you. If you wish to engage with us, start a conversation with us, then we would really love to hear from you. You can write to us at this email address, storytelling@rohanpoddar.com, which is where some of my colleagues or I would respond to you, and we would really love to start this conversation. So thank you for your time, for being patient, for listening to this. We would love to hear your feedback, suggestions, and whatever else you would want to talk to us about. And you have a good day. See you on a next webcast, next webinar. Bye for now.